So, a common question that I get asked all the time is what radio should I buy? And usually it involves these two radios behind me, the Yaesu FT-991A or the Icom IC-7300. Both are fairly similar radios, and people are just not sure which radio they should purchase. I have owned both of these radios before, and I can tell you that I do like both of them, but there are some differences and there are also some similarities to both of them. So I'm going to cover those in this video and help you to decide which radio you should purchase. So many of you who have watched my channel know that I have owned a Yaesu FT-991, and I sold it a little while ago, a little over a year and a half ago, I think now, and I purchased an IC-7300 in its place. And the reason I did that was because I purchased a IC-9700, the Icom 2 meter, 70 centimeter, and 23 centimeter base station radio. And I liked that radio so much that I decided to buy the IC-7300, which is basically almost the same radio, just with HF and 6 meters. So that was the reason why I sold my FT-991. Okay, so what are some similarities between the two radios? Well, I've jotted a few things down here. They're both great rigs. I liked my FT-991 when I owned it, and I also like the IC-7300. They're great radios. They both have USB sound cards for digital operation, so they're just one cable that you just plug straight into the PC, and you're good to go for the digital modes like FT8 and the other ones using WSJTX. They both have touch screens. They have all the filtering is included in the radio, so you don't need to buy any add-on filters. They both have a real-time spectrum scope and multicolor waterfalls. There is a note, though, that the FT-991, so not the A version, but FT-991, that does not have a scrolling real-time waterfall. The FT-991A does, so that's the later model and the current model on the market that you can buy brand new, and that does have a scrolling waterfall. If you purchase just the 991, you have to press a button to refresh, and that refreshes the waterfall in a single display, or a single refresh, I suppose you could say. So it's not continual. Whereas the IC-7300, I believe, has a superior waterfall, and that is in real time, and you can adjust all sorts of things on that waterfall, and I really do like it. Both radios have internal tuners that only operate on HF and 6 meters in the case of the FT-991. They can tune antennas around 3:1 SWR or less, so they won't tune just random wires or 10:1 SWR, but 3:1 SWR or less is what they will tune. They both weigh around 9.5 pounds, or about 4.3 kilos each, and they're very, very similar in size. And they both have voice keys for contesting. So there's some of the key features that I have used. There's obviously many other similarities as well, but they're the main features that are all similar on both radios. Okay, let's move on to some key differences now, and we're going to talk about the FT-991A first. So the FT-991A is basically a shack-in-the-box radio. You can see here that's HF, VHF, and UHF all-mode transceiver, so it will do HF to 70 centimeters. You can also, if we scroll down here to the specifications on the 991A, you can see the TX frequency range, 1.8 to 54 megahertz, 144 to 148 megahertz, and 430 to 450 amateur bands only. Now, you've got a receive frequency range here in the HF spectrum of 0.03 to 56 megahertz. However, because the FT-991A also does VHF and UHF, it means that you get to receive from 118 megahertz to 164 megahertz, and also UHF 420 to 470 megahertz. So that's something which is unique with the FT-991A that you don't get with the IC-7300. You don't get the high VHF UHF receiving. The FT-991A also does 100 watts on HF and 6 meters, and it will do 5 to 100 watts, and 5 to 50 watts on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. The FT-991A comes with C4FM, which is Yaesu's digital mode. I've never used C4FM before, so I don't know an awful lot about it, but it does come with that digital mode included in the radio. So another thing to note if you're buying the Yaesu FT-991A is that if you are using this for portable, or you're using this off a battery, The radio will draw on receive with no signal 1.8 amps. With a signal present, it's around 2.2 amps. Now, transmit, it draws about 23 amps if you're running 100 watts and 15 amps at 50 watts. So that's quite a high current draw that you're going to be drawing all the time if you're not receiving any signal. So you may find that you're going to drain your battery quite quickly if you are running this portable. So that might be something to think about. So before we continue, do you own a Yaesu FT-991 or a Icom IC-7300, or do you own both? Please let me know in the comments below and what you think of those radios. Okay, so let's move on to the Icom IC-7300 and some of the key differences between that and the FT-991A. Now, as I mentioned before, the Icom IC-7300 is a HF and 6 meter only radio, so that means that there's no receive above 74 megahertz. If we scroll down here, and we can see that here in the receive specifications, that it does not receive above 74.8 megahertz. So that's something to consider if you want some of that extra receive capabilities of the FT-991A. So you get things such as airband, high band VHF, and also some UHF functionality with the FT-991A. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Now, the IC-7300 also runs 100 watts, 2 to 100 watts on SSB, CW, FM, and RIDI. Very similar to what the FT-991A runs on HF. There's no D-Star, and there's no inbuilt digital mode in the IC-7300. So the D-Star functionality is only in the Icom IC-705 and the Icom IC-9700 for running D-Star on the VHF and UHF bands. But because this is HF and 6 meters only, you don't get the D-Star functionality or Icom's D-Star functionality. One thing to note is that you do here have 0.9 amp typical standby current and 1.25 amp maximum audio current draw. So that's half of what the FT-991A is. So if you are running portable and you want to use this off a battery, the 7300, then your battery's going to be much, much better because of the current draw is a lot lower, and it draws 21 amps on transmit as well. So even that's lower. You're not transmitting as much as you're receiving, so just something to keep in mind if you want to use it for that purpose. The other function that I've also got written down for the Icom IC-7300 is that you do get an SD card slot, which you can use for recording your transmit and receive audio. I've used that before for monitoring and also for recording any DX that I might work as well. You can also use this for storing the voice keyer. I mentioned that both radios have voice keyers, but the 7300's audio gets stored on the SD card for the voice keyer. There's plenty of other functions on the 7300 that set it apart from the 991, but I recommend that you go and check out the brochures for both of the radios below in the description. And I've only just briefly covered some of the basic functionality and the differences that I thought when I was purchasing the 7300 over the FT-991. So in conclusion, what radio do I recommend, the IC-7300 or the FT-991A? Well, it all depends on exactly what your requirements are. If you're not worried about VHF or UHF and you only want to operate on HF and 6 meters, then I would definitely recommend the IC-7300 over the 991A. You don't get the C4 FM and you won't get the extended receive, but the IC-7300 you do gain the better waterfall. You also gain updatable firmware from Icom, which comes out very periodically. They release new firmware all the time. And I just think that it's a great radio. And if you end up down the track wanting VHF and UHF, it is expensive, but you can get an IC-9700, an Icom IC-9700 radio, and that radio is fantastic base radio for 2 meters 70 centimeters if you really want to get serious on VHF and UHF. But if you want a shack in the box and you just want one radio to do everything, then I fully recommend the FT-991A. That radio, when I owned it, was fantastic. I think I had one issue with it, which was dealt with warranty, and that was related to the USB sound USB driver playing up. So I just sent it back to Yaesu and they just fixed it for me. But apart from that, the radio didn't miss a beat. I had no problems with it at all. And yeah, so it all depends on exactly what you're going to use it for. So I hope that this video helped you in making the decision on which radio you should purchase, the Icom or the Yaesu. If you'd like to see more videos on the IC-7300, then I have a link up here to a playlist where you can view all of them, and also the FT-991A here below. So please check those out. 73, and thank you for watching.